I call this fly the Crafty Micro Popper, and the whole reason I'm tying it is because I had some leftover material that I didn't know what to do with, and so I've just been tinkering and experimenting with a new pattern. I'm using a size 4 crappie hook out of A1 Baits. It's this hook that I get every time I go to Longview, Texas, or I go to Lake Cherokee, and there's this little Ace Hardware there that has these hooks that are 99 cents or 5 of them. I just buy a sleeve of them and then tie on those for a lot of it. And it gives me plenty of hooks to work with for a long time. These hooks are actually meant for catching crappie using like live minnows, but I use them for tying flies. You're going to use a medium-sized Cylndar foam head, and you can get these at fly shops if you want. One time I bought a bunch of them online, I think at Alibaba or AliExpress, one of those apps, and the foam wasn't as good. However, I got a lot of it, and I don't think it matters that much. This is one of those things where you can either go to the fly store, spend a little bit more money for higher quality and way less material, or if you're making a bunch of these and you just make them for friends and whatnot, then, give it a shot and try to get some online, and you'll get a lot more material for the money. I'm using this craft fur. What I do is I'll go to Hobby Lobby and I'll get like 3 or 4 of these sheets. I think they're $5 or less, and you get a ton of material. It's not as nice as the craft fur that you're going to get from a fly shop, but you get way more material. This is one of those things where I do think it's worth it to get this craft fur from Hobby Lobby instead of a fly store. But again, if you want the nicer stuff that's pretty and has good packaging and labeling, go to the fly shop. If you saw earlier, I measure the length of this tail against the hook shank to make sure that it's about the same length as the hook shank. So you're essentially doubling the length of the fly by the length of the shank of the hook. I'm going to tie it in, secure it nice and tight, and then put some super glue so that that's not going to pull out. The problem with craft fur in general is that the fibers in the middle of the clump that you get will sometimes pull out. So you want to make sure that it's saturated with glue so that it just becomes one big clump instead of a bunch of individual fibers. Then you're going to take this tan crystal flash. I usually just get one strand, and then what I'll do is I'll halve it and then half it, and then half it again. So cut it into quarters so that you've got 4 strips, and then you're going to put 2 on one side and 2 on the other. And if you put more in, great. It's even more flashy. Love it. But I don't think it's super necessary. And then I'm taking some Sili Legs. I think these are called centipede Sili Legs. And you're going to tie those in loosely at first. You want to make sure that glue is dried before you put them in, because the glue will actually eat the material away from the Sili Legs. But I made sure it was dry. And you tie those in. I want them to be about the same length as the tail. And those just move around, and I love the little action they give. I don't really think it makes a huge difference if you don't include them. Like if you don't have any legs for this fly, don't worry about it. You're not going to hurt my feelings that you didn't tie it the way that I did. Then get dubbing that matches whatever craft fur and color scheme you're working with. I'm going for like a tan brown, but you could easily get like green craft fur, orange, white, and then use the corresponding color of whatever color palette you want to work with. And here's the whole reason why I came up with this pattern. This like mirror wrap is what a lot of stores call this stuff, but I just kind of call it like chenille wrap. I think most people would call this mirror wrap. I don't even know what it's called because I don't know where the original bag is. I just had it in my list of get rid of this material or go ahead and tie some flies with it. So I'm just tying as many of these patterns as I can with what I've got left over, in the hope that I can use it up and move on to my next thing that I've got that I need to use up and tie more flies with. But I think it makes for a really, really nice body. I love the action that it has in the water, the way that it moves, the color's great. And what I'm doing here is putting on that popper head to make sure that I've got enough space left for it. But I'm going to finish off like that fat body by tying in the same exact dubbing that I used to tie in the back part of the fly right after I put those Sili Legs in. The whole reason I'm doing that is to make sure that it keeps the shape of what a minnow would look like. It looks kind of like a torpedo, or you got to make sure it's like hydrodynamic and that it's the right shape. And I'm using the dubbing in both places to force the material behind it back so that it's not fluffing outwardly too much. And then for some reason, I don't know why I have this preference, but I almost always will make the fly stagger from lighter in the back of the fly to a little bit darker to dark. So it's going to go from a lighter color, which is like the belly of the fly is kind of silver, and then it's going to go to that dubbing, which is tan, and then it's going to go to this like dark green tan blend dubbing at the head of the fly. And maybe that's because like when you look at perch and bait fish, a lot of times the top of the fly is darker, the bottom's lighter, and like the head of it's a little bit darker sometimes. I don't know. For me, it's aesthetically pleasing, and I went and fished this fly. If you stay tuned in the video, you'll see me catch a couple fish with it. But next step is to finally put on the foam head. And the reason why I didn't put it on there before I put that glue on was because I wanted to make sure the hole was big enough. Because if you've tied flies for a while and you use foam heads a lot, you will make the mistake a couple times where the hole's not big enough. It gets caught on the eye of the hook or on the material that you have on there, and then it ruins the shape of the foam head, and you have to like cut it off and start over. Very aggravating. Might as well measure twice and cut once kind of deal. Next step is to put on the eyes. Again, this is not something that is a must. I just think, again, it's aesthetically pleasing. I just feel like you put eyes on a fly like this, and it goes from being a piece of foam and some fur on a hook to like a little creature. And so like a lot of people will say, if you put the eyes on there, they just fall off right after you've cast it a couple times. That is absolutely correct. Putting eyes on this fly is not necessary at all. I don't even think the fish see the eyes, because the way that it's floating, the eyes are going to be right equal with the surface. But I love the way that it looks. A lot of people will say too, that lure looks like it's meant to catch the fisherman, not the fish. Sure, I think it looks better this way. You go ahead and tie it without them if you want. But I'm going to use a dollop of glue and put them down as easily as you can with like a bodkin point, or like I was using scissors to wedge it on there so that the glue would stick. And then I'm going to finish it up with this resin. This is called UV Resin Clear Finish Thick from Loon, which I think makes by far the best resin there is. However, and if you know of a better alternative that's less expensive, or even of an alternative that's not quite as good but less expensive, I am all ears. I would love to find an alternative, because Loon, this stuff is pretty expensive. The bottles I get, I think, are about $19.99 for, like, doesn't even seem like an ounce. It's such a small amount. So I'm finishing this up with the UV Resin Thin, also by Loon. You put the thick on, and then that's like the hard, thick, really strong stuff, and then you finish it with the thin, which is polish, and really makes it just look perfect once you're done. The next step in this video, I'm actually going to show you how I use this fly. I'm going to talk about the way I retrieve it, how long I let it land, the type of equipment I use. So stay tuned to the end of the video and see how I use this bad daddy on Lady Bird Lake. So here we are on Lady Bird Lake. I've got the exact same fly that I tied in the video just previously, and I am using my favorite rod on earth. It's a 3-weight from TFO, Temple Fork Outfitters. The reason why I like TFO so much, other than they make great rods, is because they have a lifetime warranty. And so I break a lot of fishing poles. I've got toddlers. I'll hit them in car doors, and now I'm talking on top of where the fishing is happening. But when I'm casting these flies out, I'm throwing them right next to the tree line, and my favorite parts are going to be right below branches that cast a shadow on the water, and I'm trying to hit that soft spot between where the shadow is and the light is, like right on there, because I feel like the fish, especially like right now, it's summertime, it's super hot, and I feel like the fish are just sitting there waiting for things to fall out of the tree, and or they're cooling off in the shade. When I caught this fish, I think it was roughly 11:30 a.m., so it was already like 95 degrees out. But this was the best bass I caught all day on this fly, and I was pretty happy with it. Nothing to brag about on Instagram, but for a fight on a 3-weight rod, that's pretty good. I think what I do here is I hook into a little perch, and that's mostly what you're catching on this fly. You have to remember, this fly might be 3 inches long. It's not very big, but it does move a lot of water. And the thing that I love about popper fishing with flies like that is that you can catch pretty big fish. I've caught 3 and 4 pound bass on poppers like this. But when it's this hot outside, you're mainly going to be catching perch, unless it's the evening time or the really, really early mornings. Regardless, this is just such a fun fly to have. Usually the way that I fish when I'm going out on Ladybird, depending on how many people are there, how hot it is, what the conditions are like, I'm going to start out small with my 3-weight, and I'm usually going to fish small worms or poppers, because I like to make sure I'm not going to get skunked. So I'll throw out and try to at least catch anything, and then if that's really, really good, I'll keep fishing it and graduate from a small fly to a bigger fly, so I can go from hitting singles to hitting doubles to hitting home runs. And that to me has always been the way I like to fish. I'm more of a quantity guy. I like to catch fish the whole time I'm fishing, instead of just hunting for that one grand slam fish that everybody always likes to post about. But to me, this is just way more enjoyable. So what do you think? Would you use this fly in your box for trying to target perch and bass during the summertime on top of the water? Please let me know in the comments, and if you feel like you got anything out of this video, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe. And I love feedback, good or bad, always trying to improve. Thanks so much for watching, and tight lines.